start off slow, really hone your skills, take the time to learn the platforms that you're using.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Media Coffee, a podcast by Cision PR Newswire. I'm your host Sami Saad, and today I'm thrilled that we're joined again by Melissa Bill. Melissa is a local reporter and a podcaster, which we discussed in our first interview. And for this interview, we're going to talk about her experience and PR on the other side. So, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us again. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us again. And I'm really excited to talk about this side of your career, which is the PR agency side, which is something I have experience in, and would love to just discuss that with you today. Um, you started as a reporter, and now you switch. Well, at some point in your career, you switched to PR. What kind of pushed you to make that switch?
Well, yeah, that's a good question, and I still kind of keep that news reporter side to me. But I was in Miami. I did my internship with Channel 10 News, and did my, I had to go, and I worked in a lot of different. I was in political, I was in sports for a little bit, and I made it all the way. I did a little bit of time in Pennsylvania as a street reporter for general assignment, and almost took an anchoring position in Indiana when I kind of had a change of heart. Went back to Miami. I started anchoring the local news there for WIOD, and then a friend of mine approached me. They're like, "Hey, we need somebody to handle public relations for us." They were like a franchising company. They helped companies franchise their concept, and he's like, I think your news background will help us, like, get a better idea of like what the news is looking for, and, approach it differently. So I started working for the company, and I got to represent a lot of different types of, from everything from like the golf, like a golf type of entertainment center, to Yoga Bella, which was like a yogurt concept, to, I mean, you name it, like just it could be restaurants. And so it was fun. I got to do their grand openings and kind of help them get their brand and their image ready so that they could, like, maybe get an in-house public relations company or hire a bigger one as they grew. And I really liked that. And that's kind of how I sprung into public relations. And then I kept going. And now I work for a mid-sized company called El Corte Global. And we handle companies like pretty much nationally and globally. And it could be a variety. So.
So, Melissa, I want to know about how journalism, your experience in journalism, changed the way you approach PR. You know how, like in the PR world, one of the biggest struggles is to understand what journalists want, and what kind of content and announcement they're looking for. So, how did that help you?
Yeah, I think, well, what happened was really like early on. I don't think I realized it as much early on, but as I started progressing more in public relations, it started thinking about, if I'm a reporter, and what am I really, like, what do I care about? Like, it's what stories am I working on? So I started to do more research on the reporters and the outlets and the people that I was pitching to, where I didn't do that as much in the beginning. And I was really just pitching, like, let's say it was an event or a product or a service, but I had to really consider why should the journalist care? Like, what are they going to get from it? Because most of the time they're working on a tight deadline crunch, and they need some kind of commentary or something to go with their story. So that's really helped me when I'm trying to, if I'm putting together a press release or a pitch, I'm really trying to think about what is it that they are going to benefit from, like talking to my expert or, featuring this product.
Yeah, 100%. And how do you approach, like writing those press releases? Or actually, let's talk about your day to day in working at a PR agency. What kind of clients are you handling, at the moment? And then also, how do you, juggle different accounts and we all know working in PR, it can be very, high pressure, high demanding, tight deadlines, all that stuff. How do you manage the workflow?
Yeah, it is very stressful. You're right about that. I mean, and it can be. It's fun, but there's those crunch moments where you're just like, oh my gosh, and there's a lot of client expectations as well that you have to manage. So really, I mean, we handle all different types of clients. So I've worked with like space robotics company that actually worked on parts that went on the Mars Perseverance. That was pretty cool. I've worked in political campaigns. I've worked for like hair products. I mean, you name it. Like, and everything's very different. Like, e-commerce is very different than obviously, working on a political campaign and working in that industry. So so that's being able to juggle and wear different hats is important. And then I think the beginning is always like checking the emails, because in the end, the most important thing is the staying in touch with the client and staying in touch with the reporters and making sure you catch, like, if you got an opportunity, you got to be on, it's a time thing, because they'll move on to the next person. And that's what frustrating, because you're like, it took me only like 30 minutes to get back to them, but they're like, oh, I already moved on and I got somebody. So I think that's the biggest thing.
And how do you manage your clients' expectations? A lot of big companies, even small companies that like sign up with the PR agencies, they expect that to get the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. How do you manage that expectation? And also, do you make it like clear for the client that it's not only the New York Times. There are like trade publications are very important, for example, to get coverage there. But yeah, when a client comes to you and say, "I want to be in the New York Times," what do you like? What's your response usually? Is how do you manage your clients' expectations?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that's probably one of the number one problems that I've ran into, like, across the board, for during the time I've been, at the present company, which has been about 6 years. It's if you don't kind of if you're not upfront in the beginning, it can be a problem as you go along, especially if that client doesn't have any like news or media to show in the beginning, like they haven't done much and they're just starting out. They really have to start with some of those smaller publications, or just writing some contributor pieces, bylines, and then we can start garnering those like bigger opportunities. And we all want those Wall Street Journal, days, or being on NBC. But just letting them know that's probably not going to happen right away. If we do get it, we'll be like overjoyed, but we need to, this is kind of like a relationship we're building with the reporters and the media outlets as well.
Yeah, for sure. It rarely happens when just like you get featured in the New York Times right away without having prior like media exposure, or if you're just starting out. It's a process, right? Like you build it up towards that goal. I appreciate you sharing that. If there's any way you could change how uh, like the workflow, anything you could change about the workflow in PR, like the basic, like less meetings or more meetings, or um, different accounts. Just can you talk to me, like what would your feedback to PR agencies be if there's one thing or a couple of things you would change about them?
I think the personal, like we went, I think remote work will kind of change things a lot. And I think that would be the one thing that I've noticed, not only with the clients, but like if you can like meet with them or see them, because we're mainly remote. So you don't get a chance to talk to them in person. If you can meet them out somewhere, having that connection, or with your like colleagues, your managers, the owner, like that, having that personal relationship is missing. I think that's the biggest thing for me. You don't have, and it can get like, if you're writing messages on Slack, like, that's what we use, it kind of changes it. Like, you could be saying something really in a nice way, but the way you write it, have you ever had that and you're on the other side and you're like, why do they sound like they're angry or something? And that, things just get taken the wrong way. So I think people, yeah, just picking up the phone sometimes and just talking to a reporter, or talking to, a news desk, and just, being able to just have those skills, I think is important.
I agree. Meeting with the client, colleagues in person, it just deepens the relationship. Having that personal, like face to face interaction, it definitely benefits everybody, I think. But also like we are moving into this remote digital world, so it's kind of like how do you balance those two things? Anyway, so let's talk about how you evaluate your press releases, but now as a publicist, right? We talked about how you evaluate them as a journalist in our last interview, but when you're working in a P on an account and someone asks you to write a press release, what's the first step? How do you approach it? Obviously, they give you the announcement, and then what do you do from there?
Well, yeah, so I'm going to look for obviously like the most important facts behind it. It depends on, I've had, it depends on what it is. Like sometimes we do like a media advisory, which is an actual like an event or they're having an exhibition or something. So that's going to be written a little bit differently. Obviously, we're going to have like the who, what, why, when, at the beginning, just the same as in, news reporting. And the title really needs to, or subject line really needs to grab the attention. I think you have to have, because a lot of people reporters are looking on their phone or they're looking on a smaller device, so you really need to have like something really catchy in the beginning of that. There has to be like a why should they want to talk to this person, why should they want to cover this event, and you really need to get it within the first like 4 or 5 words, I think, and kind of at least catch their attention. And so I think that's one of the main things, and then also keeping it short, in my opinion, depending on what it is. There's some things that you need to have a little bit lengthier, but really long, like run on press releases or pitches are, I think, I mean, in my opinion, it just kind of loses the person sometimes. And they just, unless it's something very technical, like with a space robotics company, then there was things in there you just can't delete. It's part of like the announcement, and there's an actual product or something that they're coming out with.
Yeah, and I really encourage everyone to, especially comms people, to look at the state of the press release report that Cision comes out with every year. There's a lot of great insights there that you could learn and you could use and incorporate into your writing process. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Um, this is kind of related, but it's more general. When it comes to announcement, um, what kind of announcement do you think companies should send to or like pitch the media or write a press release about? Do you know like new hiring announcements or new products or research? What do you think is worth writing a press release for?
Yeah, and I think that kind of differs depending on the company. We worked with a company that was more in the healthcare tech industry. I'm just using them for an example. And they had a lot of different products that they were launching, and they had new hires and that type of thing. And it was within a short period of time. So we wanted, they wanted to make a press release for pretty much everything. And we had to kind of tell them, look, we really need to gauge like which one of these is really important to you, like is like the main things that you really want to get out there. Because again, if you're sending too many out, they're not gonna pick it up because it's just too much about that one, let's say, company or product. So we just tell them to kind of pick their top ones, and then we just help them come up with a plan. Okay, we're going to do this month. We're going to switch to the maybe the announcement for the new CEO this month, and then we're going to do that. And if it's some smaller type of announcements, maybe we just do a pitch on that particular announcement and we don't do a full press release, or maybe we can weave that into another press release that it happens to tie into.
That's great. That's a great point. And now we talked about what announcement deserve a press release. Let's move on a little bit broader. What companies should hire a PR agency? Um, do you have any thoughts about that? There whether like hiring a PR agency or an in-house comms person, whether or not to do PR at all right now, maybe wait and do it later. Do you have any thoughts about that? Which companies should hire a PR agency or in-house comm?
Yeah, I think it depends. Obviously, it's something that's, it could be costly. I think the first step is definitely to know your brand and have your brand image. And, like what I did with the franchise company, I helped, them get the ball rolling so they could just start, with their branding and get like a little bit of exposure out there. And then from that step, when they feel like they're really ready to get that messaging out in a bigger way, I think that's when it's time to go to the next step, and that's when a public relations person or can help. And that the decision to keep it in house or to hire a company really also depends on the size of the company, whether they want to, have somebody as a full time person, or they'd rather just delegate that to a company to handle for them. And I think everybody, I was thinking about this too, because even government agencies need a PIO or a public relations person. I think it's pretty, whether whatever industry you're in, e-commerce, business, HR. I think there's a lot of industries.
Yeah, I would say government especially need PR, especially
Yes,
now.
definitely.
Just the times we're in.
Right.
But yeah, I do agree. Every company needs PR. It's just a question of when do you need it and how like you approach it. Do you need a full PR agency or can you hire your own person? What at what stage in the company are you in? Are you just a startup? Are you a public company? If so, then obviously you would need PR. And there's different goals and different needs for each company. Sometimes it's a local restaurant that just wants to create a buzz or like reach local coverage, let people know that there's a new restaurant opening or something. Or it could be a huge company that they just want to maintain their image or their reputation, and not where you hire a PR agency that takes care of that. But yes, basically agree with your answer there. Um, let's shift a little bit. What's something that PR professionals worry too much about that actually doesn't matter?
Let's see. Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, I think, because I spend a lot of my time doing a lot. I mean, it does matter, but I do a lot of busy work that, in my opinion, sometimes doesn't matter. I want to keep my focus on getting the opportunities. But I think okay, so the biggest thing I feel like we waste time on is like some of the smaller tasks that I think we can kind of put off to like maybe later in the day, and we get too bogged down in like just like I don't want to say like paperwork, but that type of thing. I think we really have to put focus on getting the opportunities, making sure we have a good relationship with our clients. I think that would be my opinion, is just some of the things that I think the biggest things are having the relationship with a client, and obviously, making sure you build your relationships with the reporters and the outlets, and the things that is the busy work that we kind of get caught up in, being too I don't know, being too strict with some of these like rules. This has to be done at this time. This has to be being too strict on ourselves when it comes to like some of the smaller tasks, because you can really do it maybe this evening. It doesn't really have to be done in that particular way and stuff. That's what I find is like the busy work that holds me up.
Yeah, 100%. There are so many things that PR people worry about. It's just the nature of our work. Especially when you're working with an account services, you always worry about what the client is thinking about your work or your presentation, anything. I feel like that's something that people can maybe spend less time worrying about because the clients are people too. You talk to them, they're also just like you. They have a lot on their plate to work on, and so I think worrying about that too much. That's something that we could work on.
That's a
Um,
good point.
I wanted to ask you a little bit because we kind of talked about this about how you like manage your workload and everything, but I want to expand on that and ask for like hard advice. We're working in a PR agency, whether you're starting out. Um, or you've been working there for a while. It's just so much going on, and there's so many hats you're wearing. You're writing, you're communicating with clients, you're doing research, you're at events. So how do you just manage all of that tasks, all of these priorities? When you see yourself like in a point where like it's too much, what do you do in that point?
I mean, that's when you have to either ask for help. I have gotten to the point where before I would just like try to manage it and do everything by myself, but I got better at just saying, okay, I need help. I cannot do this. I need someone to assist me. Can someone please help? Delegating like some of the things to maybe somebody else who has time on the team to help out. And I really let people know too if I have too many accounts, because I used to just take them all on, and then I'm like, I have 10 accounts. I can't do this. I'm overloaded. And I think that was a big learning curve because it's not really helping me and it's not helping that client if I'm overloaded and I cannot give them the service that I really should. So that was probably the biggest learning thing for me is, start off slow, really hone your skills, take the time to learn the platforms that you're using, whether it's Cision or, just all the platforms that you're utilizing. Make sure you know how to build really good lists. That's another thing. I've, spammed people, where it's not really the right subject, or, you have to be really, really diligent with your list and just make sure that even though you pick those topics and those subjects, that the list is accurate and you're not just emailing people. I think those are the biggest things.
That's great advice. I would add to that, find something that you enjoy the most doing out of all the things that you're doing. Whether that's like researching lists or communicating, talking with the clients, running meetings. Find what's like you're best at and what your strength is. But you still have to do the other thing. But like if you find that one thing, then people will go to you for that one thing, and they will rely on you, and you can kind of like grow much faster in that way. Well, thank you so much again, Melissa, for joining us for part two of this interview. And it's been a great discussion and wonderful to find out about your experience in PR. And thank you so much again for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Likewise.